hit 11 o'clock. And as a result, we will begin our morning critical conversation. Our guest today is Chief of Police of Collegedale, Brian Hickman, and he is going to answer all questions related to policing Collegedale, what it's like to police a city that is between two cities, Cleveland and Chattanooga, that are actually high on the list of, as Chief of Police has explained to me, high on the list of most dangerous cities in the state of Tennessee. But he can talk about that a little later. At this time, I'd like for us to pause for a word of prayer, and then I'm going to ask our Chief of Police to introduce himself rather than I introduce him. Let us pray. Gracious Heavenly Father, as we spend the next 50 minutes talking to the Chief of Police, Brian Hickman, I ask that your presence will be with us, that the result will be that everything we talk about, everything we say, and the way we say it will be glorifying you. This is my prayer in Christ's name. Amen. Well, at this time, I'm inviting Brian Hickman, our Chief of Police, to introduce himself. Brian?
Well, good morning, first of all. So I really appreciate everybody taking the time out of their day to have a good conversation, and I'm really open to having a really good conversation with the students, the faculty, the members of our community. So that's something I've been wanting to do for quite some time. So thank you, Dean Groen, for setting this up. So a little bit about myself. I've been on the police department since 2000. So 21 years. I started out as a reserve officer, which is pretty interesting. I was a reserve officer for about 8 years until I was hired on full time, and went to police academy at Cleveland State. And from there, I worked patrol for quite some time, had an opportunity to go to CID, which is the Criminal Investigation Division. Did about a year in CID before we got a grant to do a traffic officer to involve basically just traffic enforcement. Did that a number of the years, and during that time frame, I was able to go to a class called Drug Recognition Expert. I became one of the first drug recognition experts in the state of Tennessee, and one of the first 2 instructors in the state. So I get to teach all over about how drugs impair people, drug impaired driving. So I was I was the traffic investigator for quite some time. I actually helped start our special operations response team, and became sergeant over K9, traffic, special operations. And then 11 years ago, I got the call. We had an opening for a police chief. Put in my application for it, if you want to call it that. And our city manager hired me to take over as police chief. So I've actually been your police chief for 11 years now. And if you look at police chiefs in general, most police chiefs don't last 2 years in the state of Tennessee. And currently, I'm the longest serving police chief in Hamilton County. So I take a lot of pride that we've done a lot of good work in that aspect. On a personal note, I also volunteer as a firefighter for a Tri-Community Volunteer Fire Department. I was at Station 1 as the captain. I'd been the captain since 2009, and I just got promoted to battalion chief over Battalion 2, which is our Appleton station and our Stanford Gap station. So that's been a big achievement for myself. I've been on the fire department since 1995, where I still carry a Tennessee license for advanced EMT. I'm married. I have a daughter. My wife graduated nursing at Southern Adventist University, and she currently works at Erlanger, and my daughter is a senior. over at Ottawa High School and just got accepted to MTSU and a couple other colleges. So we're trying to make those great plans on where we're going to send her. So on a personal note, that's a little bit of my life. And since we're talking about COVID, as we've talked this morning, I am still on house. I want to call it house arrest almost, but I'm got exposed to COVID, and now I'm quarantining until I can. Got my results back last night, a negative, so I can't wait to get back to the office and start working again. So that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. Today's conversation will actually be a question and answer format, and if you should be able to see on your screen that we are using Slido today. If you log into slido.com, it will ask you for a PIN number. The PIN number is C577, and you can submit questions in that format. But we'd like to start off with one question. I actually have a couple here, but one question. Brian, would you explain to us what the Collegedale jurisdiction actually is? Ooltewah seems to confuse us. So do you have jurisdiction over Ooltewah as well? And what is your actual jurisdiction?
So it is very confusing unless you actually sit down, pull out the map. It's very difficult sometimes to know who has what, even though through annexations, we know where our jurisdictional boundaries are, but it's very confusing sometimes to entertain that question. So I'll do the best that I can. We'll start with Old Lee Highway, which most people might be familiar with, Chick-fil-A, Cracker Barrel, Zaxby's, that area off of Old Lee Highway. The roadway up to Chick-fil-A is actually the city of Chattanooga. However, the businesses on both sides of that roadway is actually Collegedale. So we actually have all the way down to Cracker Barrel. It's a little frustrating for us because if somebody has a crash in front of Chick-fil-A, you would think with us having the businesses on both sides that we would work that crash and actually know that that would be the city of Chattanooga. Now, we always help each other out. It doesn't matter if somebody had a crash with injuries or something like that, or certainly we're going to respond. And usually we get dispatched anyway, just to make sure that, number one, to check on injuries and to help Chattanooga out. So that's not an uncommon thing for us. When we get to Lee Highway, it gets, it really gets funny because Lee Highway itself up to Cambridge Square and the businesses on the north side of Lee Highway is actually the city of Chattanooga. They actually have all the way up to Ottawa High School and the interstate up to almost about the 14-mile marker. And so they will have jurisdiction all the way, like I said, to Cambridge Square, the businesses on the north. So like McDonald's, Hardee's, Cambridge Square, all that's in Chattanooga. The south side of Lee Highway, so Taco Bell, the Raceway, where Dos Bros, Aldi, all of that is actually inside of the city of Collegedale. When we get to downtown Ottawa, it becomes even more fragmented because the older section of Ottawa, kind of like where the post office is and the James County, the old James County courthouse. The post office is actually in Collegedale, the roadway of Main Street's in Collegedale, but all of the older homes, all of the older sections except for Robinson Farm is actually covered by Hamilton County Sheriff's Department. So that was kind of a thing several years ago when the commissioners got together, and I think that they did not want us to annex the old part of what we consider the old section of Ottawa. So it becomes very interesting when you when you get to other parts of our jurisdiction, we go all the way out Lee Highway from what we call Dead Man's Curve. Sorry, but that's just what we call it. And it's been that way for years. But we take over the roadway and we go all the way to Bradley County. As far as going south, like on Ottawa Ringo Road, we go to basically where Redemption Point Church is. We stop just before that. And on Appleton Pike going toward Chattanooga, we stop right there at Patton. And so a lot of times, a lot of the questions that I'll normally get is, well, why did you stop somebody inside Chattanooga, or why did you stop them in the county? And it's a very valid question because most people don't understand some of the jurisdictional issues. If we see a violation inside of Collegedale, it does not matter where we stop them. We've had people that we catch either speeding or something on, let's say, Lee Highway, and they're going outbound toward Bradley County. We will generally look for a good place, a safe place to stop somebody. So that might actually be in Bradley County. That might be the safest place to pull somebody over. It might be on Lee Highway. It's a safety thing for us, and it's a safety thing for the people in the car too. You know, a lot of people don't want to get pulled over on a dark area, late at night, no lights. Sometimes it is what it is, but for the most part, we want the same thing. We want to be safe as well. So we try to stop people in good areas. So I hope that kind of answers a little bit of the question. We actually have a lot of our jurisdiction, probably a fourth of our jurisdiction, if not more, that we butt up to the city of Chattanooga. And obviously the remaining would be Hamilton County or Bradley County.
Okay. Well, we do have questions coming in.
Great.
The first one, sometimes longevity in a position can lend itself to complacency. What are your thoughts on that? What
Absolutely.
do you do
So
keep you and your agency in forward progress?
So I think one of the great, I've always been a forward thinker. We were one of the first agencies to have computers in the cars. Prior to me becoming chief, we were the first agency in Hamilton County to have in-car cameras. We were one of the first agencies. I don't think we were the first, but we were one of the first agencies to have body-worn cameras. And so you can only go so far, though, on technology when you start to outprice yourself. That's where you have to start looking at other, probably other issues where you want to either software, or you have to kind of sit down and look at where are we heading in the next 5 years, 10 years, those sort of things. A lot of the stuff that's out there now that help police agencies are getting out of our price range. And it's not so much hardware anymore as it is software and the ongoing pricing that you get charged every year to stay in the game. Obviously, we try to get some money from different agencies or different grants, but unfortunately, the smaller you are and the less crime that you have, unfortunately, those grant monies will not open up to you. They're usually reserved for more crime-ridden areas and larger cities.
So you've just talked about size. What is currently the size of your police force?
So when I took over as police chief, we were 20 total. That included me. So that was 11 years ago. We are currently at 24 staff of full-time. We have on paper 20 reserve officers. We currently have a reserve class going on. We are not at 20. Those are volunteer police officers that don't get paid. They assist our officers when they can. And I have one non-officer, a citizen that helps with our property and evidence.
Okay. So do you anticipate that the continuing widening of Apperson Pike will cause another increase in crime as occurred after the first section was widened?
Well, we did not see an actual increase in crime per se. What we have seen, and really the numbers have not gone as high as I thought they were going to previously go. I thought we would have a lot more crashes because we had an increase in our speed limit. And coming into downtown, or what we would consider downtown Collegedale, which is there near the city hall, we thought we were going to have a much larger increase in crashes. Our biggest increase in probably our hotspot area as far as crashes would be Old Lee Highway at Little Debbie. And if you've been around that area, you know that there was an extensive increase in how that intersection was reworked. And so now our crashes have actually gone down in that area because of how they reworked that. And it's helped the traffic flow coming out of Walmart, coming off Old Lee Highway. So back to your question, do I see that that's going to bring in more crime? I think what we normally have is a general issue of people traveling through. That's where most of our crime or crime that we have, our arrest and so forth, come from people traveling through. And it's not so much people that live here. As we get more housing, more development, more apartment complexes, that brings in more people. Obviously, that will increase your call volume, and it will also increase the number of calls for crime. One of the biggest things that we have right now is people that are coming from downtown and breaking into cars that are unlocked. That's probably our biggest issue when we see a crime spree. We'll have a couple of people that will go through a neighborhood at night and they will check every single door. If it's unlocked, they'll go in, steal whatever they can, get out, go to the next car, and it's over and done with in just a few seconds. If the cars are locked, they'll check it and move on to the next one that's not. And they can cover a subdivision pretty fast within probably 20, 30 minutes. And sometimes they can get into about 10 or 12 cars. And the whole reason is just they're unlocked. The biggest area that they've been hitting are apartment complexes. It's not just Collegedale, it's all over the county. And of course, we try to, you know, as far as a public service, you know, hey, lock your doors. If your doors are locked, they're going to move on to the next one.
Okay. So our next question has to do with the lawsuit regarding quotas and required enforcement activities. How has that changed policy at the Collegedale Police Department?
So unfortunately, since we are under litigation, I cannot answer any of those questions. I'm under basically a gag order by our city attorney. Once all of that is over with, I'd love to come back and re-answer those questions. But for now, since we are in litigation, I cannot talk about any of that. Okay.
We'll just move to the next question then. So what would the discipline of an officer be like if you had evidence that he or she had cut out portions of their body or dash cam footage?
So there's two parts to that answer. One, was it the actual doing of cutting parts of their body cam is extremely difficult. They cannot, most officers do not have access to be able to do that. And the company that we use will be able to always have the full video version. Sometimes what you might see on TV where things are cut out, it's because there are software where you can go out and cut pieces out, or the DAs will go in and cut pieces out. If you have a juvenile, if you have people that are not involved in that crime, they can go in and cut those pieces out and splice the videos together. But there is always a hard, full, unedited version that stays on the software. Now I say that, however, it's software and it's hardware. Things always happen. And we have had corrupt files. And when I say corrupt files, it's being when it goes from download or upload, or if there's a problem with the software, we try to work with our vendors to make sure or try to repair those. But at times we've lost, an entire week's worth of stuff just because that becomes corrupt or however it was downloaded. Sometimes we're able to work with the vendor and we're able to get that back. But a officer cannot go in and do that themselves.
Okay. So this is a question that I actually have interest in knowing the answer to as well. Anyone who's lived in Collegedale or worked in Collegedale has oftentimes noticed that more than one police officer responds to or is at the scene of a stopped civilian car. Why is it necessary to have more than one police car respond to a stopped civilian car?
Yes, sir. Great question. I get that question a lot, actually. When I took over as police chief, one of my main goals was officer safety. And I know that it is sometimes ruffled feathers throughout our community. But nowadays, especially with officers that are just merely sitting in their cars and being ambushed and killed, I want to make sure that our officers go home safe. We had a pursuit the other night, just a couple of weeks ago, where the guy got on the interstate, and while driving down the interstate, the guy leaned out the window and shot a flare gun, and the flare actually went up over the patrol car. Most people do not realize the crime that happens in Collegedale. We like it that way. We don't really sit there and post a lot of our crime statistics because, for the most part, it's not really the people that live here, like I've said before. However, we still have to remain vigilant. And if we've always kind of gone by the 1+1 rule, that if there's one person, we need to have two officers. It serves as a two-piece process. If I've got two cars on a traffic stop, there's a buffer car for that officer that's at that car that has been pulled over. Secondly, it acts as a secondary officer in case something bad happens to the original officer. So we've always had that. Now, sometimes you may see something like 8 cars on the traffic stop and you're going, what's going on? Well, we had that not too long ago. If anybody saw it, it was just a week or 2 weeks ago on Udawaringo Road near the car wash. We probably had about 8 or 9 cars. This was it was a gang of people that have come out of Atlanta. They will break into cars and then they will go to the banks and try to cash stolen checks using fake identities. This is the third time in the last couple of years that we've caught this gang. One was out of Florida and 2 have been out of Georgia. And it takes a lot of manpower to everybody that's in the cars have to be separated. They have to be searched. The vehicle has to be searched. We have to conduct an investigation, sometimes on the side of the road. So you'll have detectives there. You'll have admin staff there. I think all 3 of the admin staff was there just to help. Plus we had the work and patrol team there. So a lot of times you may see a lot more than just 2. Before and I don't want to say typical, but for the typical traffic offense, we will generally have 2 cars there. Again, one as a protection for the car that's being pulled over, and 2 for the protection of the officer that actually made the stop.
So on any given shift, So for example, currently, right now, how many officers do you have on duty?
So currently we have 3 to 4 on patrol. You have a corporal, 2 officers, and depending on what day, the sergeant will be out. If it's during the daytime, we have 3 administration that can be out on the road, also working and helping. We have 2 in CID or Criminal Investigation Division. So it just depends. We also have what we consider traffic grant. Sometimes we have officers out working traffic grant. But for the typical every day, it's 3 or 4.
So then that leads us to a question here. What sort of collaboration exists between the Collegedale Police Department and other local police departments then? Do you have to collaborate? Are you forced to collaborate with this member then?
We have to collaborate all the time with each other. And it's like I said, if a crash or something happens on Lee Highway, we are generally being dispatched first to assist Chattanooga. If the county needs help, we go out. If they have a call and they're busy on something else, we'll cover their districts, and vice versa. You may remember that we had a plane crash not too long ago. Thankfully, no injuries in that, but that obviously tied up everybody that was working at that moment. So Hamilton County called us right away and said, "Hey, we'll take your calls if need be." They had a shooting just a few weeks ago that tied up everybody on their shift. We answered their calls on the east side, or what they would consider the east side, until they could free some people up. Same thing with Chattanooga, even East Ridge. We have a working mutual aid or mutual MOU, mutual it's an agreement to help each other at any time. So, but sometimes, it might be Red Bank, it might be Saudi Daisy, even though we haven't had to do that. When the tornadoes came through, whatever the county needed, whatever Chattanooga needed, we provided. Even if it was just setting up a roadblock to keep people out of the area while they had to deal with all the things that they were dealing with. So yes, we have to collaborate, and we do that on a daily basis.
Okay. You've said more than once that we have a lot of crime that comes from other areas that are not Collegedale, or it is committed by people who are not from the Collegedale area. So are you saying the interstate brings us a lot of crime? And if so, do we have a human trafficking problem in this area as well?
I can't say that we have a large human trafficking. We have done a prostitution sting before, and it was a lot of people that were actually traveling on the interstate that got off the interstate as a part of that. Some of it was local. I don't recall anybody actually being from Collegedale that got caught up in that. Of course, we were providing the fake females, and so therefore no females were trafficked. Some of the bank fraud investigations that we have dealt with, that I was talking about from Atlanta and Florida, a lot of times they will go to some of these big cities and hire prostitutes to come with them to do the check cashing forgeries. So we don't have a large human trafficking. It's something we are always looking out for. It's in the back of obviously our minds, but if you don't see it every single day, it's very hard to see that. And we've just not seen the numbers of human trafficking like maybe Chattanooga would see.
Okay, so then what are the majority of types of calls that you address?
As far as call volumes, let me break that into 2 pieces. Let's talk about call volume as far as somebody picking up the phone and calling 911. Theft from vehicles, theft from some of our businesses, our local businesses, and probably domestics are probably the three highest things that we generally get a 911 call about, other than like crashes. Our second piece comes from traffic enforcement. We get a lot of people that are driving on suspended driver's licenses, fair amount of DUIs, a lot of drug investigation comes off the traffic stops. It's almost become an every single day event that we are getting, especially in this last month, almost every single day that we've had a drug arrest based on traffic enforcement. I think they got some mushrooms yesterday, and marijuana seems to be almost an ever-growing event. And ecstasy, LSD, all of those are probably in the last week or so.
Okay. We have a couple questions that address race. Is our police force doing any training related to addressing racial bias?
So as far as racial biasing, I'd have to find out exactly which part of our training, but it's interesting. I really, I just don't know the answer to that part. It's not that we probably haven't done that. It's just I don't know the answer right off the top of my head, and I'd have to check. So I'll write that down. And one of the things that we talked about beforehand, if there was a question that I cannot answer or don't know the answer to right this minute, Dean Negron is going to get your email, and I'm going to send him the answer to that. So if you'll let me get back with you on that. As far as diversity is concerned, I thought that was going to be one of the questions, diversity on our police department. Currently we have in our full-time staff, we have 3 African Americans, one which is our lieutenant of patrol. We have a corporal, and we just hired a patrol officer. We have a female that's also in our command staff. We have some other African Americans and females in our reserve division. So we are trying to be very diverse. As far as LGBT, we've had some over the years. I can't say for sure, because some people will obviously not say if they are or not. So we may have current LGBT on our force. So we have always, if you remember, the city of Collegedale was one of the first cities in the state to actually have same-sex marriage benefits until it became completely federal. So we talk about progressiveness. The city of Collegedale and the Collegedale Police Department has always tried to have been progressive. So when it comes to race and having that conversation, I think one of the best things to do is have a racial bias or a racial diversity in your workforce, so that you can have those conversations together as we go out into the public.
Another question about race here. The Chattanooga Police Department has public information about law enforcement activities by race at chattadata.org. Does Collegedale Police Department provide this type of transparency? And if so, where?
We currently don't put that out, but it is certainly something that you can ask for. I do on our statistical data. I have to do the data every single month, and there is a breakdown of, especially like when it comes to arrest, citation, so forth. It'll break it down into race. It'll break it down into gender, and I think it breaks it down in about 7 different races. So it's something that somebody can get a hold of. All you have to do is come to the police department or come to City Hall and ask for an open records request for that. we have had a major transition in our websites over the last few years. And so we just transitioned to a new website. I'm going to put it down on my list and see if that is something that we can start providing. And if you will send Dean Negron that specific request, I can try to get that answer to him this week.
Okay, so let's go back to the issue. You've made a comment about drugs. How many canine officers does the Collegedale Police Department have? And what is the main responsibility of a canine officer?
So currently we do not have any canine operators. We've had as many as 2 at one time. We will always reassess our situation and reassess the evaluation of having a canine. It's certainly a good tool to have. At one time, I would like to have a canine on every single shift, but obviously it's very expensive to not only purchase the dogs, but also to have the training done. So when you got to have the right person for it, you just can't pick somebody out of the group and say, hey, you're the next canine officer. They got to be very disciplined. They got to be able to work and handle the canine. And so when we have that ability and we find somebody to actually that I feel like can handle that situation, then we'll move forward and we will restart our canine program. As far as what a canine officer is supposed to do, one in their foremost jobs is to go out and try to search and look for narcotics. And that comes through traffic enforcement or assisting other officers that are conducting traffic enforcement. And also, second part of that has always been a great thing that we've done is just public information. One of our previous canine handlers, we went out and done we've done many demonstrations together. Even at Southern, we did a lot of demonstrations at McKee Foods over the course of about a year. So getting out in the community is just another piece and another part of that element.
Okay. Has Collegedale Police Department made a commitment to 8 Can't Wait?
I'm sorry?
Has Collegedale Police Department made a commitment to the 8 Can't Wait?
I don't even know what that is.
It is.
Can't wait.
Yes, it is a commitment to, in regards to restricting the use of force, requiring de-escalation, the use of force continuum, bans chokeholds and strangleholds.
Okay. So the governor came out prior, I think it was in June, with elements that he wanted all law enforcement agencies had to adopt a new policy. We had to get that policy adopted before it was either first part of July or the end of July. And we had our city attorney look at all of that and we implemented it prior to the deadline. So yes, we have changed some of our policies just for that reason. Every agency in the state of Tennessee had to change their policy for that.
Okay. This is someone is asking a personal question. Someone hit us while driving on a revoked license. Yet this person was allowed to drive away. What is Collegedale's policy regarding individuals driving on revoked licenses?
Did that happen in Collegedale?
It doesn't say here.
Okay. So if they are caught driving on a suspended driver's license, the officer has some discretion, but they are not supposed to allow them to leave or drive away with still having a suspended driver's license. Generally, we will have them call somebody to pick them up. We'll write them a citation instead of taking them to jail to post a bond. A lot of our officers will try to work with the person. A lot of times we can understand why, but we just had a person the other day that had 41 on their record, 41 times that they've been stopped and cited and charged with driving on a suspended driver's license. That person obviously went to jail because, yet once again, they're still driving on the suspended driver's license. So we, a lot of times we'll let them park the car, have somebody come pick them up. If there's an emergency and we have to leave, sometimes there's a little bit of trust that we ask them not to drive off, but they might. So for the most part, that should not happen. But if it does, it will be one of those I would like to know about it because we need to have a discussion with that officer.
So police reform has been a topic of discussion on the national and local levels, actually. What are your thoughts on these conversations regarding police reform in America? How do we move forward?
Well, it's hard to answer some of those because a lot of the things that you see in certain areas where they have a lot of issues with their police department and their community, we just don't have. And it's great because we have such a great diversity that come to the university. So we have people from all over the country that come to our university. And so therefore, you don't know what their relationship is with their local police department. It may be a very good one. It may be a very bad one. So when I look at policing across the country and I look at policing for Collegedale and we look at our future, we actually changed our what we used to call use of force. We changed that to go along with the Supreme Court's ruling several years ago. And some agencies still use the old use of force. I think you mentioned that earlier. We now basically consider it a response to resistance. And that response to resistance is not to, basically part of that is to de-escalate. We do a lot of the training and de-escalation. We have done de-escalation for quite some time. We've had Fourth Amendment. We've had a lot of training over the years with an outside company that would come in and just go over the legal aspects of not only training, but traffic stops, part of Fourth Amendment, 14th Amendment, all of those things we try to train very heavily on because in the end of the day, we consider ourselves part of the protection of your constitutional rights. That's where we have to be on the right side and not the wrong side of the law. And there are consequences when you don't do that. So we try very heavily and always have tried to do the best thing for you, whether you're going to jail or not. And I hope that is something that you have seen, especially over the last 10 years, that we've gotten very good at and better at as a police agency.
Does the Collegedale Police Department provide active shooter training?
Not in this last year, but yes, we do. Okay. Mainly because of COVID, and we've had to cut a lot of training. It's been very difficult to do training. It's just, but we have done a lot of that activity over the past several years.
In light of the Hamilton County mask mandate, has the Collegedale Police Force had to respond to those refusing to abide by the mandate? For example, in a store or a bank or anything?
We have not we have not had to respond to anything like that. And, you know, I think for the most part, we have, if somebody is causing a disorder because of it, that's one thing. If somebody just doesn't want to put on their mask, I think most businesses are asking people, hey, if you don't have a mask, we'll provide it. Please wear one for us and them. There's also a HIPAA aspect of that if they have medical conditions. So you don't really know. And for the most part, we have not received, or at least not to my knowledge, that we have received any calls like that.
Okay. We actually have just a couple more questions here. One goes back to the speeding questions we were talking about earlier. So more than 5 miles per hour is okay in Chattanooga, but not Collegedale. Shouldn't there be more consistent application of the speed limits across the larger areas, or should it be a local jurisdiction?
So are they wanting us to say less or more? If they can ask that question, because ours is 10.
Okay.
And if anybody ever says that they got pulled over for 1 or 2 over, I want to see the ticket because I'll personally pay for it.
Okay. You heard that, everyone.
I see the data on a weekly or monthly basis. I know our data, and I know I know where what our warnings are written at. I know what our citations are written at as far as speeding. And if somebody would like to see those numbers, get their email, and I will send that to them.
Well, speaking of data, let's go back to drug enforcement. Do you have data on meth, marijuana, drug usage on this area as well?
I have. So the way that it would take me some time to break that down, but currently what I have is kind of misdemeanor possession and felony possession. That's how I have to break it up for the state. However, a lot of our when we do our warrants and when we put it in what we call our records management system, a lot of officers will put it down as what type of schedule drug it is. So if they say Schedule 1 drug, it could be meth, it could be a hallucinogen. If they put down Schedule 2, it could be cocaine or something else. So I would just have to break it down and probably go into our property aspect of things, because when they do put it in the property, I can probably find out exactly what drugs that we have seized from a month, 2 months to a year. I would just have to find out exactly. It's not something that I do every month. I just normally get the numbers of the total number of cases.
Just this question here, and we actually only have a couple minutes, so this question, on more than one occasion here in the last hour, you've said that a person could ask for these statistics or for this information. Do you think that proactively releasing the statistical information on your website so that someone could simply access it if they wanted it without having to ask for it would actually increase trust and rapport between the community and your agency?
As far as releasing some of those numbers, sometimes it's a little time consuming, and that's probably not the answer they want to hear, but that's just the truth of the matter. It's something that I do, and I put it together, but it's something I'll have to think about, and I'll talk to my my boss and the city attorney about it. If it is if that would make the citizens feel better to know those numbers, then absolutely.
Okay. Just a couple final comments here. One person wants to express appreciation to you and your police force for the job you do to keep us safe. This person personally experienced help and is quite grateful for their presence. in closing here, what would you and your team most wish from Southern? In other words, how could we better help you in your job?
Come together. Come together. I think the last time that we were invited on campus, and I'm not exactly, I was there. Everybody came together, did a little sing, did some singing, sorry. And we've been invited to come eat lunch. And there was a lot of standoffish. There was a few people that actually came up and sat with us and talked with us. And we, by nature, police department, police officers by nature, and you can certainly, in today's world, we are very, very cautious. We are having a tough time just even going out into public, having worries that somebody may hurt us, hurt our family. We've had officers just the other day that somebody followed them home, killed them at their house off duty, not locally, but nationally. So we are very concerned about that. But I think the best thing that we can do as Southern and the Collegedale Police Department is simply come together and have functions together. And the more that we sit down and have these conversations, the better I think that our working relationship will become. And therefore, we can try to start bridging some of these gaps. You have a very diverse student force, and I think that needs, especially those that have had issues with their law enforcement agencies back home, where they don't feel comfortable with their law enforcement agencies. How about it's time to get comfortable with your local law enforcement agency here?
Okay. That is probably a good way to end our discussion today. Folks, I want to thank you for joining us over the last hour. Thank you, Chief of Police.
Absolutely.
Ron, for answering these questions and being vulnerable. This critical conversation is the last one for this semester. We will pick up critical conversations again and attempt to do them actually in face-to-face, starting the first week of classes, second semester in January. Critical conversations will continue to also have an online option for those who cannot meet face-to-face. Again, we thank you for joining us, and we wish you a great afternoon.
Thanks, Chief. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.